right, guys. So as you know, the platform, lives on the smell of an oily rag. We're lucky if we get the smell sometimes. But in the last 3 or 4 years, we have changed, I hope, a little bit the New Zealand media landscape and facilitated discussions that are not had elsewhere. And our audience and our reach is growing, believe it or not, quite remarkably. I'd like it to grow faster, and I am looking for ways to achieve that. Meantime, traditional media, as I predicted 3 or 4 years ago, indeed at a meeting of the New Zealand Initiative in Queenstown, I said public trust in mainstream media was collapsing, and indeed audiences for mainstream media collapsing, and nowhere has that been more true than Radio New Zealand, the state-owned and operated non-commercial radio network, traditionally radio network, run out of Wellington. A recent review, and somewhere where I worked for many, many years, 14 years as the host of Morning Report. Radio New Zealand's just recently released a kind of critique of its operations and a confidential review which shows that RNZ has no shared understanding of its audience. Many of the people on the radio shouldn't be on the radio, and its audience is collapsing, which prompted Roger Partridge from the New Zealand Initiative to write, I think, a very accurate and quick column about the state of Radio New Zealand and what its problems are. Because I'm interested in the media and we work in that space, I thought it'd be good to talk to him about that. So he joins us on the blower now. Roger, welcome to the platform again. Nice to have you back with us.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, this review, firstly, just overall, was it a good review? Do you think it asked and answered the questions that need to be asked and answered about Radio New Zealand?
I think most of them. It's been pretty clear that since the middle of the pandemic, Radio New Zealand's audience has been in decline. The review found it's lost touch with its audience. It found complacency within the Radio New Zealand team. There's a great comment that Radio New Zealand has become a patchwork quilt of taupe, and that's a pretty accurate description, I think. The one thing that the review didn't address head on, which I think is an elephant in the room for Radio New Zealand, is bias.
Political and cultural bias, extreme political and cultural bias.
That's right, and it's relatively new. If you think back through the 90s, 80s and 90s, and the 2000s with Jeff Robinson anchoring it.
Hello, there was someone else there too, Roger.
Well, for a period there was a guy called Plunket.
Yeah. And I would like to say that it was when we were comparatively the most successful that Radio New Zealand had ever been.
That's right, and you were there, I think, for about 15 years, Sean.
14, yeah.
Yeah. So whether it was National or Labour in office, Radio New Zealand was respected for, I think well respected up until about a decade or so ago. It coincided with Jeff Robinson's retirement. You went a bit before that, as I recall.
Part of my departure was I saw the total influence that Helen Clark's government was having on staff appointments and the culture of the organisation. It was appalling.
Well, you'd have a much better insight into that as an insider than me. But certainly in the 2000s, up until you left in about 2010.
Yeah.
Jeff Robinson a bit later.
Yeah.
We had both prime ministers from both parties saying pretty much consistently heaping high praise on Radio New Zealand. Helen Clark said of Jeff Robinson that he's just gone on and on. I think high quality, pleasant, and reasonable but firm. Those were hallmarks of Radio New Zealand. It really was the town square. Yeah. Where we could have a debate on the issues facing the nation. And I think it's lost its way over the last decade or so. It's definitely no longer the town square, and its audience has drifted away because of that.
Yeah. Do we need it? Or is it maybe, Roger, past its use-by date? In that, in an earlier time in New Zealand, with a difficult geography or topography, in a small nation, we needed something to communicate with each other through. Radio New Zealand fulfilled a number of roles in that time. But the fact is, technology has given people the ability to communicate and connect without the clunky old infrastructure that radio was, or indeed that television was. Maybe we just don't need a national broadcaster like this anymore.
Yes, well, my article wasn't calling for its abolition. I think it's certainly true that the case for national radio and for national TV historically was much stronger than it is now. Mm-hmm. And that's because there's a public good element with radio and TV. They were non-rivalrous in the sense that my listening didn't stop anybody else listening, and they were non-excludable. Anybody with a radio could tune in. So it was very hard to monetize the service being provided, and so state funding filled that gap. In the modern age with streaming,